A three-day manhunt in New York ended Sunday after authorities arrested a 32-year-old man suspected of killing his 70-year-old father and setting the family home on fire. The case began Thursday evening in Greenville, where police were called to a burning residence and eventually discovered a deceased man inside. What initially appeared to be a house fire quickly became a homicide investigation. On August 6, shortly after 7:30 p.m., New York State Police responded to a structure fire on Greenville Turnpike. Firefighters worked to extinguish the blaze, and once the scene was under control, investigators located the body of a man inside the residence. A preliminary investigation determined that the fire had been intentionally started, changing the nature of the investigation almost immediately. Authorities were no longer simply dealing with a fire. They were looking for whoever was responsible for both the blaze and the death. Investigators soon began searching for Thomas David Ryan in connection with the incident. Police said Ryan had been seen near Greenville Turnpike wearing black sweatpants and a black t-shirt before leaving the area in a gray 2016 Toyota Prius belonging to the victim. Authorities quickly warned the public not to approach him and described him as potentially dangerous. Residents were also asked to review security camera footage from the hours surrounding the fire, because even seemingly ordinary footage could potentially help investigators reconstruct his movements. The investigation became a much larger search as authorities tried to determine where Ryan had gone. Police learned that he did not live with his father and apparently had no current ties to the Greenville area. Investigators also said Ryan had lived a transient lifestyle, staying at different shelters around New York State. That detail made the search considerably more difficult because investigators had to consider multiple locations and possible routes rather than simply looking for him near the crime scene. Then, on Saturday, authorities publicly identified the victim as Robert Ryan, Thomas Ryan's 70-year-old father. His daughter, Stephanie Coiro, later spoke about the kind of person her father had been. She described him as someone who was deeply respected by the people around him and said he had a reputation for making others feel welcome and helping people whenever they needed it. For the family, the investigation had now put a name and relationship to the victim, making the case even more painful. Coiro also discussed her brother when speaking with ABC News, saying he had experienced mental health problems throughout his life and that he had stopped taking his medication. Those comments provide part of the family's perspective, but they do not establish a motive for what happened. Police have not publicly disclosed what they believe led to the death or why the fire was started. That distinction is important because many questions surrounding the case remain unanswered. Surveillance footage also became part of the investigation. Ring video obtained by ABC News appeared to show Ryan running away from the burning property. Authorities continued following leads while expanding the search beyond Greenville. Reports indicate that several law enforcement agencies became involved, including state police and other local, county, and federal partners. Investigators also looked into locations connected to Ryan's transient lifestyle as they tried to determine where he might have gone after leaving the area. After 3 days of searching, authorities finally located Ryan in the Gilboa area of Schoharie County during the early hours of Sunday, August 9th. New York State Police announced that the active search had ended and thanked members of the public and other law enforcement agencies for their assistance. A multi-day manhunt that had begun with a burning home in Greenville had finally come to an end. However, the arrest did not immediately answer the biggest questions in the case. Authorities had not publicly released a motive, the specific cause of Robert Ryan's death, or a complete account of what happened inside the home before the fire. At the time of the latest reports, details about formal charges and Ryan's legal representation were also not yet clear. So while the manhunt was over, the investigation itself was still unfolding. A Florida murder investigation turned into a 45-day manhunt after 43-year-old Jason Christopher Coulthart disappeared in May and was later found buried on a property in Freeport. The woman authorities identified as the main suspect, 38-year-old Isabel Johnson, remained out of reach for weeks while investigators searched for her. What made the search more difficult was that authorities said Johnson was known to use several different names and frequently move between locations. Coulthart was reported missing on May 24th after he was last seen leaving the college condominiums complex in Florida. For weeks, investigators worked to determine what had happened to him. Then, on June 25th, authorities received information that led them to a property off Sunset Lane in Freeport, about 20 miles east of Niceville. A search of the property uncovered human remains buried in a shallow grave. The discovery changed the investigation completely. According to authorities, the remains were later positively identified as Coulthart through DNA testing. Investigators also reported that the burial site had been covered with concrete, while a black Cadillac had been positioned over the area. A large white zip tie was also found around Coulthart's neck. The details immediately raised the seriousness of the investigation, and detectives began focusing their attention on Johnson. On June 26, an arrest warrant was issued for Johnson on a murder charge, but by that point, she was already gone. Investigators believed she was actively avoiding law enforcement, and authorities began warning the public not to approach her if they spotted her. The search soon revealed another problem. Authorities said Johnson was known to use multiple identities, including Harley, Jessica Elaine Bowman, Jessica Elaine Thrush, Jessica Elaine Thrash, Jessica Dowdy, and possibly Denise. Investigators also said she frequently changed locations and could persuade people to help her by telling stories involving domestic violence or other personal hardships. In other words, investigators were not simply looking for one name. They were trying to track a person who could appear under several different identities. The sheriff's office eventually released photographs showing Johnson's identifying tattoos and increased the reward for information leading to her arrest to as much as $16,000. Authorities also said 5 other people had been arrested in connection with the investigation, with several accused of helping Johnson avoid capture. Some allegedly provided transportation, supplies, or places to stay while she remained wanted. By July, the search had expanded beyond Walton County. Investigators warned that Johnson could be using disguises and different identities while moving between locations. The case attracted increasing public attention, but despite the reward and repeated appeals for information, Johnson continued to remain out of reach. Then, after 45 days of searching, investigators finally got the break they needed. On August 13, members of a U.S. Marshals task force located Johnson at a home outside Cottondale in Jackson County, Florida. Authorities said she was arrested without incident at approximately 2:30 p.m. The arrest was reportedly the result of information developed by the Walton County Sheriff's Office Cyber Crime Unit, which had been tracking her communications. That detail is significant because the search did not end because someone simply recognized her in public. Investigators had been following information and communications that eventually helped them determine where she was staying. After being taken into custody, Johnson was extradited back to Walton County, where the alleged murder occurred. Johnson is currently being held without bond and is expected to face additional charges, according to the Walton County Sheriff's Office. Authorities have also credited the multiple agencies that assisted during the lengthy search. After more than a month of searching, the case had finally reached a major turning point. The disappearance of Jason Coulthart had led investigators to a concealed burial site, then to a murder investigation, and eventually to a nationwide-style fugitive search involving multiple agencies. But the investigation is not necessarily over. With Johnson now in custody and several other people already arrested in connection with the case, Investigators are expected to continue examining what happened to Coulthart, who allegedly helped Johnson remain hidden, and what additional charges may follow.